Please, contribute to my FIL's caregiving cost a bit. A call out of the blue from my estranged eldest son's wife, whose relationship with me had always been less than cordial. Her voice seeping through the phone was filled with unmistakable discontent and anger. Caught off guard, I found myself rapidly bombarded with her sharp, fast-paced accusations. Caught in the whirl of emotions, I was on the verge of a heated retort. But it turned out that we were misdirecting our anger. The true enemy for us was elsewhere. I'm Melissa, 72 years old. Up until a few decades ago, I was the mother of two, caught up in the whirlwind of parenting. But that feels like a distant past now. Both my eldest son and daughter, who once required so much of my attention, now have families of their own and are leading their own lives. As for me, I've been quietly spending my uneventful days for the past few years. I had no idea that a major incident was about to swoop in. It all started with a phone call. One day, just as I was about to prepare my lunch, my smartphone rang out of the blue. Who could that be? A quick look revealed it was my eldest son's wife, Sandra. It was an unusual occurrence. I froze for a few seconds with the phone in my hand. Ever since my eldest son, Daniel, got married, Sandra and I hadn't exactly been on good terms. An unexpected call from her. We've been drifting apart over the years. Actually, we haven't even contacted each other, let alone met, for more than a decade. Hello? I managed to stammer out a greeting, my voice shaking with an odd sense of tension, only to be met with an obviously disgruntled voice from the other end. MIL. It's been a while. This is Sandra. Her voice, low and imposing, didn't give me the leisure to feel nostalgic. It's been a while indeed. How have you been? Is there something you need? Honestly, she wouldn't have called me if she didn't have something on her mind. As I pondered this and asked, Sandra let out a small sigh before slowly and clearly speaking her piece. Yes, I'm calling about my FIL. What? Him? Why? Before I could finish my question, Sandra cut me off, raising her voice slightly. I understand that you have your own circumstances, MIL, but if this continues, we'll be in ruins. Ruins? What do you mean? As I expressed my confusion, Sandra continued with even more excitement in her voice. Please, contribute a bit to my FLL's caregiving costs. Caregiving cost? Her way of speaking was filled with an inexplicable anger towards me. The quick chatter seemed to foster the situation. I understand it's difficult. We also can't provide care due to our work commitments, and we feel bad about that. But despite giving so much already, to ask us to increase the monthly financial support, isn't that a bit outrageous? With each new topic, elder care, financial support, I was hearing words that were foreign to me. I was confused and hastily asked for clarification. Wait, elder care? For your FIL? What? Daniel's father, I'm talking about your husband. Her tone was almost mocking. Since the start of the phone call, I'd held my tongue, but her blatant attitude finally got under my skin. Excuse me, I don't have a husband. What? I unintentionally raised my voice. Perhaps my reaction or my response was unexpected. A silence ensued. I took a breath and spoke. Sorry for getting upset and coming off as rude, but it's true that I don't have a husband. I divorced him 10 years ago, so I'm single now. Didn't Daniel tell you? From the other side of the phone, I heard a gasp. She probably knew nothing about this. Something was off. The call seemed to be getting lengthy. So to hear the details, Sandra and I decided to meet after several years. The next day, we arranged to meet at a dinner. Seeing Sandra after so long, it's obvious we've both aged, but she seemed particularly worn out. I didn't remember her being so unkempt. After a brief greeting, I listened to her story, which went like this. Since their marriage under Daniel's direction, Sandra had consistently been sending a fixed amount of money to my ex-husband. 10 years ago, Daniel suggested they increase the amount they were sending. The reason being, my ex-husband needed elder care. Up until that point, Sandra had been sending quite a sum of money, so to send any more would be difficult, she protested. But Daniel told her, "We're almost 40, right? Yet we still don't have any children. Probably we won't be able to show our parents a grandchild, despite me being the firstborn. So at least let's support our parents financially as a form of final piety." Daniel and Sandra had married relatively late, so they had not been blessed with children yet. As a woman, I understood her anxiety, so I had never brought it up, but apparently Sandra felt quite guilty about this, and so she had agreed to increase the amount. At that time, I thought what Daniel said was right, so I agreed, but then just recently he told me we needed to increase it even more. Sandra was staring down and trembling. "We're almost 50, and considering our retirement, we can't afford to give more," she protested to Daniel. Then, hearing the words that Daniel replied with, I felt like fainting. That idiot had the nerve to tell his own wife, "You haven't served your duty as a wife, so at least you could provide money." What an awful thing to say. Oh, how pitiful. I couldn't say anything, but our finances are truly tight. So I ended up taking out my frustration on you, MIL. I apologize. I should be the one apologizing. I'm not sure how to make amends. As Sandra expressed her deepest apologies, I did the same without missing a beat. I had decided to have my son apologize at a later date, but there are still many things that do not make sense. Firstly, I've never received any cash from Daniel either before or after our marriage. I've never even heard of him giving me any form of allowance. Next, this is the first time I'm hearing that my ex-husband requires care. Speaking of 10 years ago, that was around the time we got divorced. He was still fit as a fiddle back then. If something happened after the divorce, I should have heard about it from my oldest daughter. Moreover, according to Sandra, Daniel visits my ex-husband's house every weekend to help with his care. I tried going on my day off, but Daniel stopped me. He said, "You don't need to come because Mom doesn't like you." What? Why on earth would Daniel keep our divorce a secret? As we continued talking, it became clear that there were a lot of misunderstandings between us. I thought Sandra didn't like me, and she thought the same about me. But it turns out the cause of all this was Daniel. Thinking back, Daniel used to tell me things like, "Sandra said your cooking isn't good," or "She really doesn't want to come over." That's why I always had a hard time with Sandra. Upon asking, it seems that Sandra felt the same way. She had heard from Daniel that I had said things like, "I wanted someone younger," or "She's not thoughtful or charming." The reason she stopped coming to our house was also because Mom doesn't like it, according to Daniel. But when we think back, neither of us remember saying much things. Right now, as we're talking face to face, I don't feel any hostility from Sandra towards me, so it seems like this was all caused by Daniel. What on earth was he thinking? Causing a rift between his wife and his mother? I decided to call Daniel first. Without touching on the main issue, I asked about the situation. Though Daniel seemed to be a bit annoyed, he responded normally. But as soon as I casually mentioned, "By the way, how is Sandra doing? I'd love to catch up with you two sometime," his attitude changed completely. Suddenly, he became flustered and started to hang up the phone, saying he was busy. Even though I insisted on continuing the conversation, he lost his patience and yelled, "Stop being so persistent! No wonder Dad divorced you. Even Sandra hates you. Can't you take a hint? Then he forcefully hung up the phone. He was clearly flustered. Of course he would be. He would be in trouble if Sandra and I met. After all, he even kept our divorce a secret from Sandra. There's no doubt he hung up the phone in a panic. Sandra's words started to feel more and more like the truth. Regrettably, if this is true, I don't think I can side with Daniel anymore. For now, leaving Daniel aside, I decided to contact my eldest daughter. It was to know about the current state of my ex-husband. As expected, my ex-husband was fit as a fiddle. This would mean that someone is lying. Daniel is expected, but the problem lies with the ex-husband. Is my ex-husband also in on the lie, or maybe... After discussing with Sandra, we decided to explain to our eldest daughter that it was all because of something Daniel did, and asked her for cooperation. Since Daniel's birthday was coming up, we used that as a pretext. The plan was to celebrate his birthday as a family after a long time. My daughter invited Daniel and her family. Although I thought it was a bit forced, Daniel wasn't completely against the idea and responded with, "Really? At this age?" Apparently, he was more excited about it and said, "Don't forget my birthday present." What an easygoing son I have. According to my daughter, my ex-husband was excited to see me. Both were blissfully unaware of their impending judgment. Sandra and I had a thorough discussion, and we were prepared for that day. We decided to use my daughter's house for the meeting. Just in case, we asked my daughter's husband to stay in another room. In full readiness, we waited, and my ex-husband and Daniel arrived together. My ex-husband, who I hadn't seen in 10 years, saw me, and his face lit up as he rushed towards me. "Long time no see. Brings back memories." "Yeah, it's been a long time. You seem as lively as ever. You didn't seem to need any care at all." I said it with a touch of irony, but he misinterpreted it as a compliment and scratched his head in delight. "Yeah, people often tell me I don't look 70. You also look pretty good for your age. I think I might fall for you again." Hold on, that's creepy. I managed to swallow those words, which were on the tip of my tongue, and kept a smile on my face. Once we all sat at the table, my daughter poured the tea. I took a deep breath. "Now, shall we begin?" I glanced at Daniel, who was hungrily devouring the served tea and snacks, caught his eye, and started a conversation. "You're already 47, Daniel. Time flies, doesn't it? You're supposed to age." "Yeah, you've become a total granny, too." Daniel snorted, and my ex-husband corrected him. "What are you talking about? Your mom looks much younger than her peers." "That's true. There are many who need care at this age, right?" At my words, both Ken and my ex-husband looked flustered. A few seconds later, my ex-husband coughed awkwardly, trying to divert the conversation. "Well, I'm glad you've seen well. I've always wanted to get in touch, but, you told me not to." "Yes, I'm doing well, thank you." I responded with a faint smile, and my ex-husband, seemingly relieved, began chatting away. "I'm glad to see you. In fact, I was thinking that today might be a good time to ask if we might spend our remaining years together." With those words, my ex-husband looked up at me with a sharp expression that seemed to have been somewhat prepared. Then, as if diverting a well-rehearsed punchline, he firmly stated, "Our remaining years together aren't going to be long. Let's live together." I wish he'd saved his dreams for when he was asleep. Looking at my ex-husband, who was gazing at me with sparkling eyes, I gave him a particularly bright smile and clearly told him, "Oh, back before our divorce, I was nothing more than a maid. Now I'm to be a caregiver? Isn't that convenient?" My ex-husband was taken aback. "Because you're in need of care now, aren't you?" I continued, which left him gaping. Where had his smug expression and overflowing confidence from moments ago gone? He turned to Daniel, who was sitting next to him with a face like a carp, looking for help. Daniel looked at me with his eyebrows twitching. What are you talking about? Dad and Mom are both still in good health, aren't they? Oh, is that so? Speaking of which, Daniel, I heard you've been visiting him every weekend recently. How fidel of you. Daniel stuttered. Yes, his mouth twitching. That's right. I have a present for you. Partly as a birthday gift. As he brought my bag closer, I pulled out a file from it and handed it to him. Daniel took it in his hands, his eyes wide. This is... In the file Daniel was holding, there were several photos of him and an unfamiliar woman looking very intimate. These were all collected by the private investigator. It was strange for him to leave the house every weekend, even though there was no need for caregiving, so I decided to hire a PI along with Sandra. The result was damning. Daniel was meeting his mistress every week. He was caught off guard, and I was able to obtain a significant amount of evidence easily. Even the PI was amazed, saying, "It's rare for an investigation to be this easy." How about it? There, well taken, aren't they? Daniel, still holding the file, was trembling. Perhaps out of embarrassment, his face turned bright red. You've invaded my private life. Private? I was told you were brazenly walking around arm in arm. With a face as red as a beet, Daniel stared at the file. And? What happened with this lady? I asked, and Daniel hesitated for a moment before slamming the file down on the table and glaring at me. You know full well. That's right. She's my mistress. It's all because Sandra has lost her appeal. If I was satisfied with Sandra, I wouldn't be having an affair. His outrageously self-serving statement made me want to throw the tea, in front of me, at him. I couldn't believe my adorable son had turned into such a worthless man. Like father, like son, how pathetic. After all, the reason I divorced my ex-husband in the first place was his infidelity. My ex-husband had always had a habit of cheating. But with his smooth talk and persuasive words, I somehow ended up forgiving him. In the midst of all this, it was 10 years ago that we finally got a divorce. An affair came to light then, and the other party was a mutual acquaintance. Furthermore, it was revealed that my ex-husband had told his affair partner that the wife is just like a maid, so there's no love there. Thinking that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with this man, I finally decided to get a divorce. Fortunately, I could get sufficient amount of property division, so I didn't have to worry about living expenses. When we got divorced, Daniel also said that it's impossible to have an affair, I said. What's impossible is getting caught. I was confident that I could handle it well, he replied. Yet he had the nerve to say this despite being caught. Even when I presented him with so much evidence, he showed no signs of remorse. I exaggerated on purpose, saying, even then, I received enough property division, which saved me. I wonder how much you will pay to your lady, Sandra. At this, Daniel visibly paled. Hold on, Mom, please. Don't tell her, please. He stumbled to his feet and knelt in front of me. You don't like Sandra either, right? I'm getting divorced, so please keep it to yourself. His pathetic groveling reminded me of my ex-husband. I won't tell, I said. Daniel looked relieved. As he began to say, Good, Mom, you understand, I called to the next room through the door. Because there's no need to tell, right, Sandra? What? At that moment, Sandra, her face as ferocious as a guardian deity, appeared from the next room as the door was flung open. Daniel screamed pitifully and crumpled to the ground. What? Sandra! Why are you here? Wait, I'm so confused. My head is spinning. While he said this, Sandra strode over and stood imposingly in front of Daniel. Why? That's my line. What about the caregiving? The filial piety? I heard everything from your mom. But, stammered Daniel, blinking rapidly, but Sandra wouldn't let him get a word in. I don't want your excuses. All the complaints you've made about your mother were lies, weren't they? What did you want to do? What joy did you get from driving a wedge between your wife and your mother? Overwhelmed by Sandra's fury, Daniel dropped to his seat, shaking his head vehemently. No, it's not like that. I just had a little shortage of pocket money, so I collaborated with my dad and said it was a remittance. When Sandra was puzzled, Daniel mumbled, If Sandra and Mom get along, it would be exposed immediately. That's why. In other words, it seemed he and his father had been using the money they claimed was a remittance. The reason for the increase in amount 10 years ago was due to the property division to me, which had left his father poorer. Yet, his father still had some of his retirement money left, and they should have been able to maintain a normal life. When I pressed them, they hesitantly confessed. Apparently, they both had women they liked and had been giving them gifts. Upon learning the truth, Sandra let out a deep sigh and looked down at Daniel with eyes that were as disdainful as if she were looking at garbage. As you wish, let's get divorced. Also, all the money you lied about and took from our finances, I want it all back. Of course, it is apart from property division. What? But I don't have that kind of money. Sell your beloved, precious car. It can't be helped. You can pay the rest in installments. If you don't pay, I'll show up at your workplace. I'll also spread the word among our mutual friends. Oh, my beloved car? Daniel muttered, a hint of tears welling in his eyes. He glared fiercely at Sandra and raised a voice of protest. That's horrible! You're a monster! And to spread this around to my buddies, aren't you ashamed? You're admitting that you're a pitiful woman who got cheated on. Daniel! I instinctively tried to intervene, but Sandra stopped me. She squatted down to match the height of Daniel's face, and without blinking, she said, I haven't done anything to be ashamed of. I didn't lie, nor did I cheat. If I dare to say, I lacked judgment in men. I ended up marrying you. That's the only thing I'm ashamed of. Daniel, who was declared this at point-blank range, seemed to be at a loss for words. He flopped down on the floor, crying quietly. Sandra stood up with a slightly refreshed face and said, I'll consult with a lawyer later and contact you. Daniel didn't respond and just kept crying. In the end, he stayed like that for a while, even after Sandra and I returned home. It seemed that my ex-husband tried to cheer him up due to his deep depression, but he lashed out at him, saying it was his fault. Eventually, Sandra and Daniel divorced. As promised, it seems he's paying money back each month. To my surprise, Daniel came to me crying for help, but I turned him away at the door. There's a limit to being shameless. He also tried to get money from his mistress, but of course she refused. Apparently, she quickly abandoned him when he ran out of money. What's more, the mistress turned out to be a married woman. He seems to be in a hopeless situation. On a calm afternoon, over coffee at a cafe, Sandra said, He seems to be really concerned and contacts me every day, begging for help. He was crying on the phone the other day, too. Look, here he goes again. And showed me her smartphone where Daniel's name was listed repeatedly in the call history. When I replied, I'm sorry, honey, I raised him wrong. She gave me a bright smile. It's okay. It's not about how you raised him. It's genetic, isn't it? From your ex-husband? Ha ha! We looked at each other and laughed, agreeing, indeed. Now Sandra and I meet regularly to catch up. We've become best friends, a far cry from our MIL and DIL days. I wish we had become like this sooner, but it can't be helped. It's all due to that good-for-nothing ex-husband and son. Rather than regretting the wasted time, we have to enjoy what's to come. There's still a lot of life ahead of us, right, Sandra? I raised my coffee cup, and Sandra smiled and raised her cup as well. Yes, absolutely, Melissa. And we both laughed again, clinking our coffee cups in a small toast.